You can listen to The Professional Left wherever you get your podcasts, on Netroots Radio, or at our website, proleftpod.com, where you can also contribute to this podcast. There's a PayPal button at our website, or you can mail us a letter and or contribution at P.O. Box 9133, Springfield, Illinois, 62791.
This is the podcast for March 25th, 2022. It's not safe for work.
Recorded live from the Cornfield Resistance, where we want to wish our little great-nephew Kevin a happy first birthday and his awesome mom a happy birthday too. It's The Professional Left with DriftGlass and BlueGal.
Little baby Kevin is one.
He's one. We're going to go party with him in a little bit.
Yeah, we're going to have a little birthday party for him. To get with your brother, who's we don't see often enough. So
who's grandpa now?
Grandpa. And Uncle Driftglass is 6'8", and Grandpa is how tall?
I like to think of him as like 5'3".
He's not.
No, he's like 6'4". He's a big guy.
He's tall.
We're all pretty big guys. And
and so little Kevin, I found out, I have to add 2 inches to the sweater that I'm knitting for him.
I know. You'll be knitting on the way up there, adding frantically to it, going
inches, because he's long-waisted, his mommy says.
Sure. That's exactly what they said as the amazing colossal man started.
Yes.
Glenn Manning started growing at an alarming rate. No, he's just long-waisted.
He's just long-waisted.
Nope.
Nope.
Nope. But he's a boy, is he a cute kid. I mean, I'm highly biased.
Cutie. Yeah, man, we're looking forward to seeing him.
Yeah.
So this was the SCOTUS hearings, confirmation hearings this week for Ketanji Brown Jackson, who has, as I put in the draft title of this podcast, has the patience of Job, and we don't.
No.
We got together with another listener this past weekend. Steve came down from...
Hey, Steve.
Central Illinois division.
From north
of us.
From the northern area.
We see him fairly often. I mean, he comes down every few months, right? Just to visit us and have coffee.
Yeah. It's always a ball. And it always flies by. He's really good company.
Yeah. But he said, because he always gives us feedback about our show and asks about how is it going. And I always say to him, or I did say to him this weekend, I'll put the show to bed and go, that was not our best show. That was the worst show. That was a terrible show. I can't handle it. How bad we're putting the show out. It's so bad. And then 3, 2, 1, we get an email. That's the best show you ever did.
Oh my God.
I just love that show the best. And I can't hear myself.
No.
I mean, and I should add, I just got hearing aids this week. Thank you, Obama. My Affordable Care Act insurance pays for hearing aids. I have, not high decibel, but high frequency.
High frequency.
High frequency hearing loss. Can't hear high voices, can't hear high beeps. And when I couldn't hear the beep when the car beeped to say the seatbelt wasn't on, and I couldn't hear the beep, I was like, okay, that's it. Can't hear my car beep. I've got to go take care of this. And I love them. I love my new hearing aids. I had a conversation with my daughter who has a high voice, and I often miss words of hers, and I could hear, and her voice sounded lower to me, but it wasn't that. My brain was telling me it was lower because I could hear her.
Right.
So that's so fantastic. I recommend them. Hearing aid technology has just exploded over the past few years. I know you can get them over the counter. I went and got, like I said, my insurance covered a hearing test and an audiologist and so forth. So got that done, and I just love them.
Got all the. I went along because we always go to each other's appointments for doctors and stuff. And he was good at explaining.
Yeah.
Here's exactly how your ear functions. Here's the stuff. Here's what this does. Here's what I recommend. Here are your choices. We're going to tweak and test. And here's a demo model you'd like to take.
I'm wearing a demo model these days, and then I'll get my real ones in a couple weeks. And I'm supposed to call them if anything's going wrong or feels not right. But so far, so good. I really like them. And they are different from, I was living with an elderly couple when I was in graduate school, as their, caretaker, semi-caretaker and college student living in their house. And she had hearing aids, and, the expensive batteries
Oh,
and
yeah.
the humming and the size of them and so on and so forth. And none of that exists. All of the complaints you might have about the expensive batteries, the how they look ugly, they're not noticeable. You can't see them. If you look, you just can't see them.
Yeah.
And they don't beep and hum and, do all the noise making that they had done in the past. I just can't believe it. And then when I get my real ones, when I'm not wearing demos anymore, he can program them to be Bluetooth earbuds.
Right.
Which is just crazy. So yeah, highly recommend. So
now you hear,
Steve said,
you hear everything that I've been hearing.
Oh, it's crazy.
And
in
it's
the bathroom, the squeak of the door and the shower and everything, I can hear.
Now you know how I know when someone is upstairs opening a dresser drawer.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you have bat-like hearing, and I think the kitchen sink is dripping. It's like, you're in the bedroom. What are you talking about?
Yep, there is. Well, and as I mentioned, this is all tangent. By the way, this whole podcast is going to be tangent. No, but as I mentioned, one of the first signal that the unnamed and unreliable narrator of the Telltale Heart is insane is that he can hear everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's it was. I think it was, the sound of blah, blah, blah. I think it was his eye. And it sounds fine until he says, I can hear all things in heaven and hell. Or I hear many things in hell. Like, I'm doing this from memory. He's insane. Yeah. I get it. But that bringing the auditory sense into a story immediately. So that by the time the story ends, it's a very short story. The auditory ending of the story is the beating of the heart under the floorboards.
Yeah,
I'm spoiling a 160-year-old story, so I apologize for that. But it is when you have really acute hearing about some things, the world just is shaped differently.
Yeah,
and when something odd, with an odd noise someplace, I'm like, I have to go check the furnace.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's useful. It's very, very useful. And when you're robbed of those things.
Well, and I just want to say, I know I've had an exchange on Twitter with someone who says, Medicare doesn't cover them.
Right.
That, there's reason number infinity why Build Back Better needs to pass.
Right. Exactly.
And we've talked about this with the audiologist as well. The contribution that hearing makes to older people's cognitive abilities and the loss of hearing and how that contributes to a more rapid decline if you're dealing with dementia. It just makes sense for insurance companies to cover this because it improves the outcomes of people's lives. That's better. Your brain cognition is better if you can hear.
I don't think the poor man's Zach Galifianakis audiology commercials, hearing aid commercials, where his son is like, I guess my father doesn't love me anymore.
Yeah, right.
That takes it a bit too far. I think that no. But it is, and I'm speaking to someone who has, active, all five senses active, and blessed in that way. I've been wearing glasses since I was 7, I think, 7 or 8. So I have very poor vision, but boy, has it made a difference in one day. Boy, has it made a difference in, I think, your quality of life.
No, you've noticed, have you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, thank you. Thank you for taking me, and thank you for being in my corner and backing me up and all that good stuff.
Faking like I was talking when I was quiet just to mess with you.
That was so funny.
Yeah.
I think you really got the audiologist there because you just started moving your lips and not saying anything to me. Can you hear me?
Shrugging and like, what? Why can't? What?
She can't hear him. She can't hear me, Doc.
Which is a great shtick to do on a completely, audible medium where there's no video because you have no idea what I'm doing. But anyway,
wearing a mask.
And wearing a mask.
You were wearing a mask at the doctor's office, so that was funny.
So
anyway,
Steve,
getting back to Steve. Steve said, and his feedback was, he loves it when we get mad on the show. And he says, especially when BlueGal starts swearing. Then I know we're in for a treat.
You wouldn't like her when she's angry.
He loves me when I'm angry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's very righteous and very precise.
So fortunately for the purposes of our sweary show, we have the Republican members of the Committee on the Judiciary in the U.S. Senate.
And
I don't want to talk about all of them, but I picked out a couple that I want to talk about.
Can I make a suggestion?
About.
This is to help our sound editor, which is you, with this podcast. Could you just read off the names of the ones who weren't complete assholes?
No, I'm done.
Yeah, you were done. Oh, I'm sorry. Just crumple up that paper and you can hear that now.
All done. Every one of them was a complete asshole.
Yeah,
but Ted Cruz in particular was a complete asshole. Tom Tillis decides to come out against interracial marriage. And the next day, oh no, I didn't mean it that way. What do they are they thinking? They're not thinking.
Well, no, that's where I have to disagree because my understanding, and you get this sort of thing fifth hand, so it could just be an internet. But my understanding was generally the word went out. Please don't be racist assholes.
Yeah, right.
Just don't be racist jerks on camera. Do bad stuff. Dirty her up somehow, but for God's sakes, don't come across as racist assholes. And that went right out the window immediately.
Yep.
And day one, usually day one is supposed to be, here's the candidate, here are qualifications. It's sort of like a little bit of an easing into the process. Nope. Right for the jugular.
Right out of the
day
bucket.
One.
We're going to talk about interracial marriage. And she's sitting there with her white husband.
Right.
I mean, it couldn't have been more racist.
Well,
we're going to talk about critical race theory and children's books and you letting pedophiles off easy. And every statement is a confession from some of these people.
Oh, yeah. Well, and you know what happened? This is the complete aside, but our Senator Dick Durbin made Lindsey Graham cry and run out of the room, which is kind of beautiful.
He ran out a couple times.
I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Well, and he was very personal and very fair about everything as chairman of the committee. And
yes, he was.
Even my TV husband, Ellie Mistel, said, Durbin did a great job. And then apparently Ellie Mistel's mother called him and told him, I told you not to sleep on Dick Durbin. I get his emails. She said.
Hey,
and
you're welcome.
I replied because Dick Durbin, of course, is our senator. I said, Ellie Mistel's mother needs to meet Loretta Durbin.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and they need to cook together and invite everyone over because damn. Anyway,
getting back to the list of senators from the Republican Party on the Committee of the Judiciary, Josh Hawley, terrible. Again, this stuff with the transgender bullshit. Yeah. Ted Cruz wants to know if he can be Asian, if he can convert to being Asian. And what I found interesting on his YouTube podcast, Alan Dershowitz, on his YouTube podcast.
Alan Tidy Whitey Dershowitz.
Tidy Whitey Dershowitz.
Dirty Dershowitz.
Said, Ted Cruz was a student of mine, and I hope he didn't learn these stupid questions from me, because this is bigotry.
Of course it is.
Now, why would Alan Dershowitz all of a sudden be so bent out of shape about anti-trans bigotry? Well, he talked about it. I have friends whose grandchildren switch genders, and everyone in the family is so much happier because the grandchildren are happy with who they are. You can convert from Judaism to Catholicism, from Catholicism to Judaism. We thought you couldn't convert from one gender to another, but it turns out you can. It turns out some people need to. And so from my experience, I can tell you it's bigotry to say that trans people aren't people, et cetera, et cetera. He went on and on.
Yeah.
When you've got regular human empathy, you don't need to have a family member or your best friend's grandchildren to point out to you that people are people and should be allowed self-expression.
Right. And let's make sure that the flip side of this is clear. Just because you have personal empathy for an issue because someone in your immediate family has it, doesn't mean the other 90% of your opinions aren't appalling.
Right.
Witness
and he
Dick
then
Cheney.
went on. Well, then went on. Dershowitz then went on to talk about how horrible it was. The previous beer guy was treated.
Kavanaugh. Yeah, he was treated. They asked him about his hobbies, and nobody asked him about how he got all of his debts paid off with dark money.
Right.
Nobody asked about how was the previous occupant of this seat bribed out of the seat or forced out so you could have it.
Right, right.
They asked him, you used to pump a lot of iron, didn't you? And then he got,
oh yeah, right.
Well, he didn't smile enough and he got very emotional, and you really can't have that. I guess you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't even started talking about Marsha fucking Blackburn.
Oh, you haven't muted her yet, have you? Because she's like
I've blocked her. Oh my God. Yeah. And that's because I can go look at her tweets anytime I want.
She's a special
like her
friend.
ridiculous tweet about today was the Constitution guarantees us life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but not abortion.
No, it doesn't. First of all, that's the Declaration of Independence, you
it's
stupid,
all of Twitter.
Stupid. God, really? And Trump and Rand Paul, I'm convinced, all have aliens living on their head, communicating like weirdo information into their brains, because they're terrible people to begin with, but they really do amp it up. I mean, this is...
Well, and her question to Judge Jackson, she had her fingers underneath the words to read them one at a time.
Mm-hmm. Big words.
Not only had she not written the question that she asked, she hadn't read it ahead of time. No. She had not rehearsed the question.
Her staff...
Yeah, hates her.
Her staff wrote them out phonetically, I'm sure, so she could sound out the big words.
She got the question from some Federalist Society or Kevin McCarthy via the Federalist Society. Mm-hmm. She does what she's told.
She does.
By very bad men. And she's a good little girl for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets her a Senate seat. And that's why I hate her.
She's awful. She's
her
moron.
Obedient lust for power. And the way she gets power is to behave. And that's, to me, just an atrocious waste of womanhood. I can't stand her. So, and I'm not the only one.
Nope.
There were some Tennessee pastors today who came out with a statement. If you don't mind, I'm going to read it.
Please.
They're all from Tennessee.
Throw in some swear words so we know it's you.
Senator Marsha fucking Blackburn. They did not say that.
No.
Tossed away an opportunity to behave professionally in favor of currying votes from her political base. Her vocabulary of fear-mongering is in stark contrast to the faith she claims in a savior who reminds us repeatedly, do not fear, and the first shall be last and the last shall be first. While on the other hand, Judge Jackson shows the ability to live out the believer's call to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God, as all Christians should strive to live out. She's not a good Christian.
Well, and that's,
not that there's no religious test. That's the point. There's no religious test for being the United States Senator. There should be a basic IQ test for being a United States Senator, and there isn't.
I have heard indignant people on my side of the aisle who I love dearly and who are my allies for 30, 40 years, maybe longer, say, if they were a real Christian, they wouldn't blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
Look, they're not. They're not.
They're not.
But you can't, holding a mirror up to them doesn't work.
No,
invoking the Bible doesn't work.
Yeah.
Asking them about their true faith doesn't work. They are reprogrammable meatbags. They are just little Nazi zombies.
They're sucking up to a base that they have no respect for. You can't imagine how low the opinion of their own voters these senators have until you observe them in action.
But they know...
Now, Lindsey Graham, he's another one. Mm-hmm. I mean, he doesn't give a rat's ass about the voters of South Carolina.
No.
Except that he win a primary.
And that's all he needs.
Yeah.
That's all he needs.
So he'll stand up to Trump before the election, suck Trump's dick after the election, and it doesn't matter. Whatever it takes to keep that base chomping at the bit for him when he needs it. And the rest of the time, he just has no principles.
No. And if you don't believe me, you don't believe BlueGal, just go over and look at, who was it? Jennifer Rubin's column this week.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer Rubin. Fringe Republicans are not the problem. It's the party's mainstream. That's the headline from the Washington Post. Now, I don't want to direct any traffic over the Washington Post. I don't think Jennifer Rubin has a lot to atone for.
Yep.
But she's gotten to that place where it's like, oh, fuck, it's the whole party, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. And it's been the whole party for the whole fucking my life, right? Yep. So, okay, well, that's what we have now. It's not a few. It's not the fringe. It's not a small part. It's not a recessive gene. It's the whole fucking party. And the whole fucking party is very well representative represented on the Judiciary Committee.
Yes.
Because all the freaks and weirdos and racists and homophobes and assholes and nut jobs are all there. Even if they have to pretend to be that, they know they have to pretend to be that because that's the clip that gets on Fox News. That's the clip they stick into their ads when they go to the morons and ask for their votes and their money.
And that was so clearly obvious this week that they were not even talking to Judge Jackson.
No.
They were talking to Fox News.
Yes.
And Fox News Views. I have a question for you, though, DriftGlass.
Sure.
We have in our notes, and I'm sorry to skip ahead.
Please.
Everybody can go watch Cory Booker's speech about directly to Judge Jackson. You are worthy. You're not going to take away my joy.
Right.
And it's very moving and very beautiful what he says. I watched another clip of him sitting on this committee where he took the opportunity to compliment Marsha fucking Blackburn.
God.
I've learned a lot from your questions, Senator.
I have too, but
we've all learned a lot. We've learned how to not say the C word out loud.
Yeah. We've learned how to censor ourselves.
We don't do that because we're better than that, right?
Especially now that we have hearing aids and
we can hear ourselves talking. I know not to say that word, so I don't say it. But I'm wondering about, his holistic vegan approach to being nice to everybody. I mean, I guess he's aiming at a different audience from the listeners of this podcast.
I believe in my heart, and this is where I know that never Trumpers are liars. I believe that the people who depend on the opinions of others for their jobs understand those people very, very well. They have to. I mean, you have to make 50 plus 1% of the people in your district or your state or in your listening, area happy enough to give you their attention. So I do not believe for a minute that the fact that the Republican Party is a shit pile of bigots and imbeciles came as a sudden surprise to people that were writing ads, getting those assholes to the polls. Rick Wilson knew for decades that these people were terrible.
Well, because he was aiming ads at them. So of course he did. Yes.
And so this whole, oh my God, where did all these racists come from? Nonsense. You're right off the bat, okay, you're a fucking liar. You're a fucking liar. You don't want to take responsibility for what you did. That lets me off the hook for ever believing a single fucking word you ever say because you're lying about really basic stuff. I believe Cory Booker probably knows his voters.
Yeah.
And his voters want him to be, man is on white bread happy all the time. And if he wants to do that, if he wants to be, saccharine, it works great when you're praising someone. It turns my stomach when you're talking to Marsha Blackburn.
Yeah.
Do you vote the right way? Okay. But there is a thing, and it's on the Twitter machine somewhere. It's not me, but it's, Democrats, this is broadly speaking, run for office promising to work with Republicans.
Yeah.
Republicans run for office calling Democrats baby-eating monsters.
Right.
Can you see the fucking difference? And chasing the good opinion of Marsha Blackburn, even if you're just doing it on camera, just makes me sad.
Yeah.
Because somebody's got to stand up, and they do. They just never make it onto the camera. Democrats message great. They just never get the attention they deserve. And point to her, Katie Porter, just as an example, this bitch is out of her mind. And you should be ashamed to vote for her. And if you're not ashamed to vote for her, what kind of person are you? You suck as a citizen and you're a terrible Christian. And God knows you are embarrassing the people who raised you. And that's just not something Cory Booker can muster ever.
Right.
It's not in him to do that. And honestly, Barack Obama had the same problem.
Yeah.
Right up until he got punched once too many times.
Well, and I will say, you and I talked a lot this week about, Judge Jackson's patience and her sitting there being calm and judicial and unlike other nominees that we can name. And the difference between what a white man is allowed to do at that seat and what a black woman is allowed to do at that seat is miles apart.
Night and day, yeah.
And you and I sitting here in Central Illinois as well-educated white people saying Marsha fucking Blackburn, we get away with that.
Sure, of course we do.
Barack Obama and Cory Booker say something like that, and they're the angry black man for the rest of their lives.
Gone.
So,
and my only point being, once you get the job, do the job.
And Barack Obama did a lot more of that job in his second term than he did his first.
He sure did. He absolutely did. He finally figured out. I'm sure he knew the whole time, but it was like, no, I'm a process guy. I'm a middle guy. I wrote about this in 2010.
Yeah.
The devil in the deep blue sea, the devil in deep blue red base. It's you're half Harvard yard, half back of the yards. You want to play everything right down the middle, and it worked to get you into the Oval Office. Now you're there, and the problem, you have a lot of problems on your plate. Number one problem is the Republican Party is an anti-democratic, bomb-throwing, racist shithole who hates this country, and you have to get that through your head. You have to deal with that problem, and he couldn't do it. And into his second term, he started talking a lot more about Fox News. But every fucking speech, it was both sides do it. Yeah. Every fucking speech, it was my friends on the other side of the aisle. And I know you have to do that when you're in that job. But when the problem with your country is COVID, you don't get by. You don't stop. Well, let's not talk about COVID. The problem with this country is the Republican Party. And not talking about it in those terms, getting your party on a war footing for these people was a massive failure on his part, as far as I'm concerned, for all the other good things he did.
Well, and you just mentioned both siderism.
Yeah.
Joe Biden today at his press conference at NATO.
I saw that.
Did you see that?
I did.
Reminded the foreign press of why he ran for president. And it very specifically boils down to that my asshole predecessor said both sides.
Very fine people.
Both sides about Nazis. He said, good people on both sides about Nazis. And that was when I decided I couldn't stand by and let that happen. I have to stop it. There's an article at Common Dreams today about a Cambridge, Massachusetts high school student who was asked on her homework assignment to list the positive and negative effects of imperialism. And she's an African-American student. So she left the positive effects of imperialism box empty.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Good for her. Yeah.
And it went viral because the negative effects of imperialism are everything.
Yeah.
Everything about imperialism. There isn't a good side. And this is going on in Ohio now. There's an Ohio legislator who was in deep water because we have to talk about how the German soldiers felt during World War II in order to fully understand the history of the time. No.
Come on now. No.
You do not have to do that. That is not, you don't have to do that, period.
No.
So,
no.
But I'm wondering, DriftGlass, I know we've talked about this ad nauseum, but it does seem to me that the reason that the Republican Party in particular is pushing this critical race theory bullshit is because their hidey hole of both sides is rapidly shrinking. And they are prying it open by pushing it to a schoolroom setting and saying we have to talk both sides. Because we have to get them in the cradle. You know, my dad sent me that song from Rodgers and Hammerstein this week. Yes. You have to learn how to hate.
Yes.
You can't, if you don't get them when they're young, you know, with a party that's rapidly aging out, if we don't start teaching the youth of today to try to understand what the Holocaust, the good side of the Holocaust.
You know, a lot of Germans believe that they blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, right.
Okay. I do not believe the both. I believe exact opposite. Oh. I believe both siderism is coming back strong. I see it everywhere. I'm hyper attuned to it because I'm the originator of the both sides don't hashtag.
Yes, you are.
And the award adjacent T-shirt and merch that all say both sides don't on it.
Yep.
And I listen to lots of stuff. I listen to a whole bunch of podcasts and I read a lot, and it's just out there now.
Is it everywhere in the Bulwark Lincoln Project world?
It's everywhere. Yep, absolutely everywhere. It comes in different forms and different flavors. But right now it's painfully clear that the media friendliest podcasts, the ones that have friends on MSNBC, the ones that get invited on the air, the ones that benefit from their proximity to mainstream media outlets and mainstream media newspapers and op-ed pages are what I call a 4-quadrant podcast. And I stole that term from Hollywood, from the movies, where there's a thing called the 4-quadrant movie. And the 4-quadrant movie is, do you hit all 4 major demographics, both over and under men and both over and under 25 male and over and under 25 female? If you only hit a couple of those, you're not going to get your movie funded very often. If you hit all 4 of those, blockbuster, you can have all the money you want. The whole idea is, what audience segments are you pleasing?
Mm.
And I decided to apply the same logic to podcasts. And I started to notice very quickly there is a 4-quadrant podcast that you see. Virtually every Never Trump podcast is a 4-quadrant podcast.
Well, explain that.
Quadrant number 1, happy talk. Got to have a little happy talk. Hey, it's good to see you, BlueGal. Football's great. How are your grandkids? Do you love dogs like I do? I saw the funniest thing in the movie. We're just folks like you. We're just folks. Let's get into a little chat here. Let's sit on the beanbag chairs and sip a little peppermint schnapps and rap about the future, Just because we're old friends here. Second quadrant, those damn Republicans. Did you hear what those rascally Republicans are up to? My gosh, those Republicans, blah, blah, blah. This is generally over some issue that's genuinely important, actually democracy threatening.
Mm-hmm.
The third box is, but both sides. BlueGal, both sides. When you think about it, aren't the extremes on both sides really pretty bad?
And that A.B. Stoddard quote that you had me listen to, yeah. I could not believe it.
Well,
you want to explain that? Oh, go ahead.
The 4th quadrant is those darn liberals. Those darn liberals. And in the case of those darn Republicans, it's something genuinely threatening to democracy. Like I said, it's something incredibly critical. Voter fraud. It's the January 6th
judgeships.
Yeah, it's really bad shit,
right,
and it's shit that's endemic. If this is the whole party. Right. Those darn liberals is always something trivial or local or a single example of something that somebody dredged up from somewhere.
That's San Francisco City Council, you got to be careful about those liberals.
The Berkeley School District. Did you hear what crazy thing the Berkeley's? There's this one transgender diver who I think is competing, and it's unfair. And here's what liberals should do about it. Mm-hmm. And okay, but this is an example of the larger problem with the left. And it never is. It never has anything to do with anything that anybody in the Democratic Party is actually up to or doing. It is just, and it's straight Fox News shit. This is the thing that they brought over from their Fox News years. Find some weirdo living under a bridge who says, I live on welfare and I live on...
I have all the food stamps from 4 different accounts.
I'm lazy, don't want to work, and the government pays for it. Yay! See, this is exactly what the left believes. This is Newt Gingrich shit from the 90s.
Yep.
That woman who murdered her children? Pretty typical for a liberal. That's pretty much what they do. And
he does that. He does that. Yeah.
He does that. He did that, and he did it, and successfully.
For 40 years. Yeah, his whole career.
And they have directly imported this from their life as Republicans because they can't stop hating the left. They cannot do it. It is beyond them. The only one who's reasonably honest about this shit is Stuart Stevens, who you never see anymore. Yeah. You never hear Stuart Stevens on these podcasts because Stuart Stevens' line is, it was all a lie. It was all a lie. Everything was bullshit. It was a racist party from jump. I didn't know about it, or I lied about it, or lied to myself about it. I didn't want to see it, but it's true. We were fucked from the beginning. It goes all the way back to Bill Buckley. And nobody wants to have, Miss Debbie Downer on their show talking about, no, Charlie fucking Sykes. It didn't start 5 years ago or 5 minutes ago. It started 40 years ago. And they don't want to hear that voice on their podcast. But the whole object of creating a 4-quadrant podcast is, and almost everyone is like this, is that you center yourself as the reasonable middle. You are the sensible center between the crazy leftists and the crazy rightists, because it really is both sides. And we're happy talking because you can trust me because I'm a person just like you. And the quote from A.B. Stoddard, who you see all the time on MSNBC. She has a Morticia Adams thing going where she never changes her expression. And she's always dryly disgusted with the entire political process. And isn't it a shame? And she's on with Charlie Sykes, and it was a perfect 4-quadrant podcast. It was Republicans are making a shit show of the confirmation hearings, but what about Robert Bork? Remember him? Bork. Bork did stuff. Remember that? And whatever happened to Merrick Garland pales into insignificance to what those bastards did to Robert Bork. And then, of course, they don't actually read what actually happened with Robert Bork. It's the origin myth of Robert Bork.
Yeah.
And everything went off the rails because the liberals screwed Robert Bork. And then we get on to the really exciting thing, which
weren't there a bunch of Republicans that voted against Robert Bork?
There were 6 of them or 7 of them.
Yeah.
And it was, and there were people writing opinions in major newspapers. There were conservatives saying you should pull this guy out. What fascinated me about this particular take is that 5 minutes later, Literally 5 minutes later.
And this
Charlie
was the part
Sykes,
you played for me. I couldn't believe it.
well, there was a two-parter. 5 minutes later, Charlie Sykes completely negates everything he just said by saying, but you remember in the 70s when Nixon nominated 2 people and both of them got shot down? Wasn't that crazy? Like, what? You mean there was a revolt against unfit nominees before Robert Bork?
Before Robert Bork?
Holy shit, I thought you said Robert Bork was singular, unique in history, and screwed everything up from now on. But because Charlie Sykes doesn't listen to the words coming out of his own mouth, he just wandered off into the 70s and said, yeah, remember those 2 nominees back to back that both got shot down because they were unqualified and one was a racist?
Mm-hmm.
So now we're just toddling along, and A.B. Stoddard starts talking about, and suddenly it's not the Democrats who did this shit, it's the Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
Democrats are to blame for Robert Bork, right? Bork.
Right.
Suddenly it's Democrats aren't politicizing the courts enough.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
The problem
is the Democrats have let the right get away with all of this dark money. The Federalist Society that and I'm quoting exactly, the best minds of the right have been organizing, fundraising, planning, recruiting, grooming to take over the courts for years in an effective way is the Democrats' fault.
She said that is the Democrats' fault.
The Federalist Society and all the shit they've been doing for 30 years is the Democrats' fault. Look, granted, I broke into your house and stole all of your furniture in your car, but you didn't have a firm enough lock on the front door. So really, isn't it your fault that I broke into your house and fucked you over and destroyed your property? Because it's always the Democrats' fault. It's always.
I'm telling you guys, she literally said it's the Democrats' fault.
Yes.
That the courts are stacked for conservatives. Yep.
And immediately after blaming the liberals for politicizing the courts, they pivot 180 degrees and say, and the reason Republicans have gotten away with the murder is because Democrats haven't politicized the courts enough.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't emphasize that in 2020, 2016. Well, I don't know who the fuck she's talking to, but we sure as shit did talk about it. But we were also talking about fascism and the economy and plague.
Hillary Clinton talked about it frequently on the campaign trail. Yes,
and then of course we have to have the both sides. Yeah. The real problem is the completely dysfunctional Congress, BlueGal. the gridlock of our politics. It all just becomes red versus blue. This was something that Athena Wise, Allison Hanschel was saying. Jay Rosen was saying this week on Twitter. It's like these gridlock has agency. Yeah. It's a natural event that no one has any control over.
It just takes 60 votes to get anything through the Senate, as if that's just the law. It's not. It's a decision that Republicans and Mitch McConnell made.
Exactly. But we can't say that because then it sounds like everything is Republicans' fault, and that violates the 4-quadrant rule.
Yes, it does.
And you start listening to this shit. I listened to Joe Walsh talk to Charlie Dent today. Both out of Congress, and they said a lot.
Joe Walsh, did you say?
Joe Walsh, former Shouty Cracker Congressman Joe Walsh. Talked to Charlie Dent, who's also out of office, and they talked about how much they hated each other when they were in Congress because he was a Tea Partier and Charlie Dent was moderate center-right. So a lot of shit I agreed with. At the end of the podcast, where they come to, the real problem with this country is the extremes on both sides.
Uh-huh.
And you know what? There's a crying need for the center-right and the center-left to come together in some sort of independent party movement. And because it always fucking comes down to, we can't just support the fucking Democrats. We can't do it.
Doesn't that dovetail very nicely into your discussion of the Lincoln Project's latest?
Oh, yeah. Well,
please go ahead.
I'm sorry.
The Lincoln Project has a new project, everybody.
They do. Well, and you've probably heard about it because it's made all the papers. The Lincoln Project has a new thing that they've been pimping on every Lincoln Project adjacent podcast for months and months, called The Union. And The Union is a place for us to all come together and defeat the things that are happening in the world that are bad. And this has been written up by Axios. They got Peter Coyote to voice over a nice ad for it. And you know where I stand on this, BlueGal. Not Lincoln Project, but I have on my blog right now 3 in draft, a post all about this. And I have 3 posts. I have 3 tweets from myself about, look, whenever you hear someone say, it's not about the left or right, this is not about Republicans and Democrats, grab your fucking wallet and hold on tight because you're about to hear a whole lot of bullshit. Because here's the thing. If one side is fascists and they're bad, and one side is opposed to them, and they're clearly identifiable as those things, then it really is about us versus them. It really is about left versus right. It really is about Republicans versus Democrats. And anyone telling you otherwise is not just lying to you, but they're trying to get you to buy into something that's bullshit on its face. So the Lincoln lads, they've got a new thing out. First words. This is Reed Galen, who's a co-founder of the Lincoln Project, and Joe Trippi, who's a former Democratic consultant, now works for the Lincoln Project because they've got a lot of money to hire people. And they have devoted this entire podcast this week to just pimping this project. Just this thing. That's all they talk about. So, Joe, why don't you talk about how we got to this place and how you see that fitting into the broader pro-democracy movement? And Joe Trippi says, well, I've said the greatest catastrophe for the country right now is to not understand that this is no longer about right versus left or Republicans versus Democrats. And that's when all of your alarms should be going off.
Yep.
Okay, what Joe Trippi must have meant is, except for these 70 million meatheads who voted for Donald Trump, right? I mean, you don't want to hear from a Midwest flyover asshole like me, but didn't Jennifer Rubin just write up a thing about it's the whole fucking party, right? So, and then he talks about it's going to take all of us to defend our democracy. It's going to take all of us to defend our democracy, to defend the Union and the Republic. You know, got to defend those things. Yeah, but defend them against what? And he talks about the broader anti-authoritarian, anti-democratic forces that are abroad in the land. What you mean, Joe, is these 70 million meatheads who voted to elect Donald Trump and the entire leadership of the Republican Party and virtually every Republican elected official. They will not say that it's the Republican Party. They'll allude to it. They'll mention it. But when they talk about it's going to take all of us across all ideologies, we have to put our past differences aside and bring people together who believe in this thing and only this thing. And that one thing is the demolition of the Republican Party. No, it's to defeat the anti-democratic forces. Now, what this thing actually is an aggregator. You go and they have a huge audience. And I've gone to their website and I've checked out a bunch of stuff, and a whole bunch of people, groups that have signed up for it are like democratic organizations, or one Republican organization that they're all like Bush administration alums who are all like, we have to vote for Joe Biden. Right. We have to vote for Democrats. So my question is, since there are already hundreds of Democratic Party, liberal left organizations doing exactly the same thing, why the fuck are you pretending that they don't exist? Why are you starting a whole new thing over here that talks about all of us, Democrats and Republicans and independents, coming together to do what, Joe? Well, to defeat the Republican Party. Oh, so the only tool to do that is the Democratic Party. So why not just say...
But there are plenty of, I don't know how many there are, but there are Republicans out there who will refuse to cross that river.
Well, sure. And maybe we should talk about that.
Well,
maybe we should mention that.
And it's those people, the people that want to defeat Trumpism, as they call it.
Right, but
still want their tax cuts and still want, no abortions and still want to keep women at home and want their white male 1950s back. Don't want the browning of America, worried about the border. They're Republicans.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of money, apparently, in compiling a mailing list of those people.
Yes,
and that's what this project is.
Well, and I'll do one more quote. It's a very short one. Reed Galen says it will take the deepest, broadest, and most diverse coalition that any of us can remember to defeat the bad forces.
Big old mailing list of blasts. They want your email address.
And my response was, congratulations, Mr. Galen. You have just described the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
We are the deepest, broadest, most diverse coalition imaginable. We are a big old rambunctious tent. And lots of people get into this party that I don't necessarily approve of, but they don't approve of me, so that's okay. But this weird obsession with these former Republicans that can't say, we need to get as many Democrats elected so we can destroy the Republican Party because it's a fucking monster factory. They can't say it.
Yeah.
They'll talk about Donald Trump. They'll talk about Trumpism. They'll talk about the authoritarian forces that are abroad in the land. But they won't just say, here's your choice, apple juice or rat poison. Here's the Democratic Party. It's apple juice. You might not like apple juice, but you're thirsty. And here's rat poison. That's your other choice. There aren't 15 other choices. There aren't 20 other choices. There are 2 choices. Which would you like to drink? We have 2 parties. One's a fascist authoritarian personality cult. The other one isn't. Which one are you going to vote for? And all this dicking around with like, well, I want a third way. I want a third party. I want a center left, center right coalition. I want a union where we bring everyone together. When will America wake up? No. There is no America in this conversation. There are the people who are on the side of democracy who are almost all in one party. And there are the people who are opposed to democracy who are in the other party.
Okay, but DriftGlass, I would go back to Cory Booker again versus our way of talking and realizing that there are people in the Democratic Party who we call allies who are terrified of conflict, who are terrified of calling people out for what they actually are, calling out Republicans. They want everybody to be nice. And whether it's, who hurt you as a child, I want to say that you can't stand up to bullying, but they can't. And so, branding exercises like the union, and that's what this is.
It's a mailing list collector.
It's a mailing list collecting branding exercise that's going to put money in Rick's pocket. That's what it is.
Sure.
Our goal, save democracy. No, it's not. No. Your goal is to get a mailing list. But, will they get people to vote for moderate Democrats? Maybe. I don't know.
I hope so. It doesn't ever say that anywhere.
Nope.
No, it just says we need to form a coalition of like-minded people across all stripes and ideologies to defeat the bad people who are doing shit. It's like the bad people who are doing shit is the Republican Party.
It's the Republican Party.
And when you walk into the voting booth, you don't have, it's not like fucking Baskin Robbins. No, I would like a little bit of this.
But it's all these keywords that they use are, democracy and coalition and grassroots and it really is just a branding exercise for let's build that golden bridge to a time when Republicans aren't associated with Donald Trump.
Did you want to talk about Matt Lewis and the golden bridge to tomorrow?
Well, Matt Lewis, I think we talked about this last week. He said it out loud in writing.
Yes, he did.
I want a golden bridge away from Trump. And if it's Ron DeSantis, so be it. If it's Ron DeSantis, so be it. That's not Trump. We'll take it. And they just want to rebrand again. That's what this is. It's Tea Party. And this is what I keep saying. They cashed those checks with the Tea Party. And they don't want you to remember that they cashed those checks with the Tea Party. All this, and we predicted this, DriftGlass.
Sure.
The minute, first of all, before Trump was elected, I wrote, don't you dare call it Trumpism.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you did.
Because I was looking at interviews with CNN was doing with Trump voter panels in 2015.
That's right.
Where they were saying, it's all about stopping illegals from coming into our country.
Right.
And you looked at it, and why did Allison Camerota have these particular people on her panel? Was it because they just fell off a truck and said they were Trump voters? No, they were registered Republican voters in Iowa.
Right.
Registered Republican primary voters. They didn't just fall off a truck. They were part of the party before, and they will be part of the party after. And so I said, these are Republicans. You can't call this Trumpism. These are Republican primary voters putting Trump at the head of the Republican Party.
And
and you can blame yourself, Republicans, the Republican establishment. Yes, I'm talking to you, Rick Wilson.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because you guys decided that it would be perfectly okay to nominate Jeb, and put Scott Walker as vice president.
Yeah.
And that would, Republican voters would flock to that. And they were so embarrassed by Bush, and you forgot that. Embarrassed them, made them look bad to liberals.
Right. Made them look dumb in front of the liberals.
Made them look dumb in front of the liberals. And so they were never going to vote for another Bush ever again.
No.
And so when Trump goes to the Republican debate and tells Jeb Bush to his face, your brother did not keep us safe, you could not believe what we're hearing come out of his mouth. Where is Reince Priebus to stifle this guy? This is off script.
Right.
But it is exactly the get out of Bush free, ticket for these voters who don't want to vote for Bush, who want to take over the Republican Party and not be embarrassed again. Well, how'd that work out for you, Republicans?
Well, remember, you can't bring up the past because the past never happened. No, and this, exactly. Across all of these things I listen to, that is the consistent message.
Yeah.
Which is None of us had any idea things would get this bad. None of us had any idea that the base was this way. Joe Walsh, who listened to these fuckers on his radio show all the time, was like, when Trump, was talking about building a fucking wall and keeping those folks out, and everyone gasped. He said, "But I had 100 phone calls the next day from people going, fuck yeah."
Yeah.
You know what? Here's the thing. Here's what's delightful about having archives is I can go back to 2005 and pull 100 posts saying exactly what the Republican Party was going to do, who they were, what motivated them, and why we should be scared shitless that their leader was Rush Limbaugh and Newt Gingrich,
right?
And where they were going. And all of these professional, highly paid political consultants, mercenaries, and radio jocks who now dominate the podcast space and the radio space and who've colonized cable news all swear they had no idea about any of this. And I just look at them and go, oh, fuck you. Of course you knew. Of course, these people are the people who put money in your pockets and roofs over your head. And to pretend now that you had no idea, other than Stuart Stevens, to pretend that it was a complete shock to you. This was the Lincoln Project thing again. It was like, we had no idea a year and a half ago how fast this whole white nationalist thing would metastasize. And now it's a really big threat, so we all need to come together. Like, you know who could have told you that? Every fucking liberal in America could have told you this to your face. You didn't want to listen to us because we told you things that would affect your fucking pocketbook. And you were working for Jab, or you worked for Ted Cruz. And, well, we'll just get the rubes to vote for whoever the fuck we tell them to, because that's what rubes are for.
Yep.
And then they decided they liked Donald Trump. Why? Because he talked to them as Rush Limbaugh talked to them for 30 years.
And he did nothing but watch Fox News all day and regurgitate what he heard on Fox to those voters who also watched Fox. And then they said, he's saying what I'm thinking.
Oh, my God. It's like he's in my head. I love this man. And, well, we've had enough of that.
It backfired on the establishment. They thought they could control it.
And then they all did what cowards and quislings do. They fell into line, except for 5 of them who ran out of the party saying, not my fault, not my fault, not my fault.
Right.
Hey, Democrats, move over. Let me tell you how to run your fucking party.
Exactly.
Fuck you all.
Exactly. Yeah. Fuck you all.
I did want to mention that Mo Brooks has joined the Donald Trump Under the Bus tour. So.
Mo Brooks, you know what? Mo Brooks. It's not Donald Trump under the bus. It's Mo Brooks under the bus first.
No, he's Donald Trump. The Donald Trump under the bus tour. Donald Trump throws everybody. Eventually, everyone goes under the bus, right?
And Mo Brooks, his poll numbers weren't good, and Donald Trump won't endorse anybody who's not a sure thing.
Right.
We can have 100% winning all the time. So Mo Brooks's Twitter handle was Mo Brooks endorsed by Donald Trump until yesterday. And now Mo Brooks is going on local TV in Alabama saying, Donald Trump wanted to overturn the election. It wasn't a big lie. He just wanted to overturn it, and he kept asking me to overturn it. Rob Reiner on Twitter said, when January 6th bulletproof vest wearing Mo Brooks starts turning on you, you're getting awfully close to being the cheese standing alone.
Yeah. Well, most of the GOP would nominate him and elect Trump tomorrow. Yep, they would.
They would. We got to stop that.
So letter from a listener.
We have a letter from a listener. I want to make sure we read this. This is from Jim. And Jim wrote us today and said, guys, the annual kick-in for my subscription is a bit thicker this year. Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
I want the coffee mug with Morning Edition inked out and Pro Left Podcast written in Sharpie. The reason being, this year, my donation to Pro Left Podcast is a bequest in memorial to a friend of mine. It didn't take a lot of thought. Jim, my friend Jim, they're both Jims, was a guy who got to see me at my most boorish, but still spoke to me decades later. Fair enough, but there is a tie-in to what you both try to accomplish. Jim was a newspaper man.
Oh, yeah.
Doing the Lord's work for better than 40 years. He was the guy who deadlined all the boring but important stories in his community. He got to experience the exquisite boredom that is a school board meeting. Those are bad enough if you have a stake in the proceedings. Imagine keeping up on multiple districts, not one of which do you have kids or taxable property within. Then there are zoning committees, town budgets, state bond issues, leavened by the occasional tractor-trailer crash and multi-fatality house fire. Jim did all of this every day since 1981. He didn't chuck it all to write press releases for politicians or hospital consortiums. He knew he was doing good work and he had the knack for it. He'd occasionally whip up a review of a Springsteen album or his thoughts about Otis Redding, but then it was back to the grind. Love or hate your local media outlets, at least there are several sets of eyes to filter the product and one or two lifers who give a damn. We do ourselves no favors by letting it wither. From my selfish perspective, it didn't hurt that Jim worked on Cape Cod. I spent a lot of time at his place during the off-season, swilling beer, eating scallops the size of my head at the Land Ho, and solving the problems of the world. Over the years, I'd get an out-of-the-blue phone call, and we'd spend an hour and change free riffing on rock and roll, Bonaparte's mistakes, and of course, the state of the media. I always ended up with a reading list, currently 2/3 of the way through Stephen Kotkin's Stalin biography. Now I'll never again pick up and hear that voice. Jim, I'm really sorry for your loss.
That's really sad.
Yeah.
Boy, yeah.
So it's appropriate that I use this year's contribution to the Professional Left podcast to memorialize one of the good ones. Your media criticism has had a pretty profound effect on me. Well, thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
I've admittedly been inside the bubble looking out, but God knows I've heard plenty of uninformed, pig ignorant shit over the years. You two get it right, and I appreciate that. I've been a fan since the days Steve Gilliard strode the earth.
Oh my man, old OG.
There's another. OG. That's another loss to the world. Yeah. I would love to hear what Steve Gilliard had to say about this week's hearings.
Oh,
seriously.
God. Oh God, yeah.
He would not hold back. And I don't foresee any changes. Keep up the good work, Jim. Jim, we are so sorry for your loss, and we deeply appreciate your contribution in honor of your journalist friend. Thank you so much.
So glad you had someone like that in your life. That's really
what a blessing.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Hey, let's do a news roundup, DriftGlass.
Sure. This week, the United States government formally accused Russia of committing war crimes in Ukraine.
Putin's press secretary refused to rule out the use of nuclear weapons in Europe.
Yeah. NATO will double its troop presence on the alliance's eastern flank in response to Russia's continuing war in Ukraine.
And we are certainly, our thoughts are with the Ukrainian people. Absolutely.
If that wasn't abundantly clear, just look at this country. The church service we watched in the morning always opens with prayers for Ukraine.
Yep.
It's everybody's Facebook page in our community. We can't add anything to the profound thoughts others have already put out, other than I wish there was something more we could do.
And I hope that this experience makes me more sensitive to other wars of invasion and violence and war crimes, because they're there. And just because they're not European and white and my people, and our people, we have more of a connection immigration-wise to this part of the world. Justice is justice. All right, that's all I'm going to say. Paul Manafort was blocked from leaving the country because he tried to use a revoked passport. Manafort attempted to fly from Miami to Dubai before Customs and Border Protection barred him from boarding the plane because of an issue with his passport.
Oh, what a shame.
Trying to go to Dubai. I wonder why.
We've covered this already in comments, but Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson continued to defend her record against increasingly aggressive and unhinged questioning from Senate Republicans that fact checkers and Democrats have debunked and criticized over and over again. Here's one example. Senator Josh Hawley attacked Jackson in his opening statement, accusing her of issuing lenient sentences in child pornography cases as a trial judge. The White House called Hawley's criticism toxic and weakly presented misinformation. They didn't call him the other number of things I would have called him, but they're better than me. Adding that in the vast majority of Jackson's cases involving child sex crimes, the sentences she imposed were consistent with or above what the government or U.S. probation recommended.
The Biden administration has exhausted the funds needed to purchase a potential fourth coronavirus vaccine dose for all Americans. Unless lawmakers pass the $15 billion funding package, right now we don't have enough money for fourth doses if they're called for. And this basically means the uninsured are screwed.
Yeah, and we will need them. There is another variant on the way because that'll be this way for the foreseeable future. And it is called for, and I'd like a list of people who are standing in the way of that.
Mm-hmm.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki has tested positive for COVID-19 for the second time in 5 months. and former Senator Hillary Clinton has also tested positive.
A federal judge ruled that former Kentucky, we're not going to talk about the Supreme Court justice who is apparently in the hospital with COVID, because I will say something that is going to get me in a lot of trouble.
You see, but you're wrong. It's flu-like symptoms that are not COVID related.
Excuse me. Yeah.
We're not sure what it is, but it ain't COVID. So don't even say that, because that would be, yeah. Uh-huh.
A federal judge ruled that the former Kentucky County Clerk, Kim Davis, remember her?
Oh, vividly.
Knowingly violated the rights of same-sex couples by denying them marriage licenses.
This should come as a relief to Marsha Blackburn. The House passed the Crown Act, which would ban, quote, discrimination based on an individual's texture or style of hair.
Yeah, I don't think Marsha Blackburn should be discriminated against because her hair is awful.
I have a long list of things that she should be held responsible for, but her ridiculous hairstyle is not one of them.
Yep. Hilariously, former Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows is now under investigation for alleged voter fraud in North Carolina. His wife apparently filled out 3 separate false election forms.
Uh-huh. Now, how many years is that other woman in jail for voting in the wrong precinct, I think?
Yep.
Joe Manchin advised a conference of oil and gas executives that they should look for a, quote, return on investment when making campaign donations, and then he dropped his pants, bent over, and said, line up, boys.
Yeah. Stacey Abrams had a cameo on Star Trek Discovery, and it flipped out Ted Cruz and the National Review and Tucker Carlson. All flipped out. How dare she pretend to be president of Earth?
Yeah.
And again, Ellie Mistel said, look how they react to a fictional Black woman playing a fictional space character.
Mm-hmm.
And now watch that same magazine, National Review, comment disinterestedly about Judge Jackson.
It hit them where they're weakest, honey, in their racism. And that's just not fair. It's not fair to call racist because it makes them feel sad.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, jobless claims are out. Oh, no. They've hit a 50-year low. And the unemployment rate has dropped to 3.8%. This is great news for John McCain, but really bad news for Joe Biden, I'm sure, in some way, in some
bad
universe.
News for Joe Biden that everybody has a job that wants one?
Yeah, pretty bad, pretty sad. I don't know what he's going to do with that information other than talk about it every time he's in front of a microphone.
Each week we post to our Facebook page and website an Internet Kitty sent in by you, the listeners. This week's Internet Kitty is Miss Pia. Miss Pia was a special needs kitty that once she was adopted, her special needs disappeared. She is I am being told that it is pronounced Turkish Vans.
Oh, please. Not in Midwest.
Yeah, in the Midwest is Turkish Vans, baby.
We got Versailles, and we got Marseilles, and we got Vans, so deal with it.
Mm-hmm. She is fluffy and adorable and likes sunny sunspots. And she does not have special needs anymore because she got love and her forever home. So we love her, and we will put her up at our Facebook page and website. And of course, Miss Pia eats freshly poured cat food, our fake sponsor. Whether you serve pet store perfection or dollar store dreck, your cats will sit on the kitchen floor and demand that the food they eat is only freshly poured. Freshly poured, freshly poured. Oh, my Lord, it's freshly poured. And you could visit Miss Pia at our Facebook page or website, and you can send your kitty, and you can send your internet kitty, dog, or other pet to us at our email address, proleftpodcast@gmail.com, where you can also write to both of us. Feel free to write us. We love hearing from you. Be aware that if you write us at any of our addresses, we reserve the right to read your email or U.S. Postal Service. Go Postal Unions. Letter on the air unless you say otherwise. #FireDeJoy. Don't forget our gourmet coffee guideline. If you can afford to buy an espresso-based beverage for yourself, buy one for us. This is not charity. This is our job, and we love doing this podcast. Approximately 1% of our listeners support this podcast with a contribution, and you can too. See our website, proleftpod.com, for details. We've got PayPal, postal address, Patreon. We've got Both Sides Don't t-shirts. And all of it is there at proleftpod.com. Please share our show on social media. And if you love this particular episode, support our effort by becoming a patron via Patreon or a donor via our website. Thank you so much for doing that. Hey, DriftGlass, how are the Internet Kitties doing this week?
Well, BlueGal, the Internet Kitties have a long, long list of Republicans they would like to see reincarnated as a black woman at pretty much any point in United States history.
Let's think about living. Think about living. Just think about loving. Think about loving. Just think about the hooping and the hopping and the popping and the lovey-dovey. Let's forget about the wine and the crying, the shooting and the dying, and the fellow with a switchblade knife. Let's think about living. Let's think about life.
The Professional Left Podcast is recorded under a Creative Commons license, copyright 2022, BGBG Productions Incorporated.